Outdoor Resources being called to order. Ryan, please call the roll.
Senators Bean,
Here.
Black, Bernsketter, Brown, Carter, Crawford, McCreary, Razor, Washington. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
We have a quorum. We're going to hear two bills today, one from Senator Gannon, one from Senator Crawford, Senate Bill 132 and Senate Bill 335. Since we have a quorum, if it's all right with you, Senator, we'll go ahead and go into executive session. We have one bill to vote out. So I will make a motion that we move into executive session. Do I have a second? I have a second. We are in executive session. I will now move that Senate Bill 209 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill's for the committee. This is the bill I presented on February 7th. It repeals the provisions regulating to industrial hemp and hemp cultivation. All the Senate substitute did was clean up a little bit more language that we forgot to put in. So, any questions? So with that, I move to adopt Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 209. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the Senate Committee Substitute, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We have adopted Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 209. Now we'll have a discussion on Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 209. Any discussion on the Senate Committee Substitute we passed, right?
Just a quick question about that.
Yes.
Would you be willing, as we move forward, to possibly tighten that title? Because the title is so broad, we could be asking for a huge problem as it moves to the floor, because it says repeal of state-administered programs. So I'm just looking out for, like, this is non-controversial and cleanup that needs to happen, but I would hate to see this turn into something else.
I'd say we could be very open to that in
Okay.
the Senate substitute.
Okay.
So.
All right, very good, thanks.
All that. All right. Any more discussion? So I will move to do pass Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 209. Do I have a second? I do have a second. So, Ryan, would you please call the roll?
Senators Bean,
Aye.
Black, Bernsketter, Carter, Crawford, McCreary, Razor, Brown. 6 ayes, no noes. Does pass. Senator Razor. 7 ayes, no noes. Vote carries.
By your vote of 7 ayes to 0 noes, the motion carries. All right. Now move that we move out of the executive session. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor of that motion, please aye. All those opposed, no. We're out of executive session. So with that, first up is Senate Bill 132. Senator Gannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee, for allowing me to present Senate Bill 132. Senate Bill 132 deals with the confiscation of all animals. This bill covers quite a few aspects of animal confiscation, and there are plenty of witnesses here today to speak to you about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Gannon? Hearing none, anybody here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 132? In favor of?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Karen Strange, President of Missouri Federation of Animal Owners. This is a bill that has been around for a long time. We first started working on this when it was then Representative Jason Smith, and we're still working forward with it. The format we would like to take on this is that we do not support animal abuse or cruelty in any manner. This bill is hopefully to make a level playing field in that when animals are confiscated, the owner must post a bond for their care. We have a recent case that we just received information on, haven't read the full case, yet, but there were 49 dogs confiscated by an outside animal rescue group that is not licensed in the state of Missouri as they're required to be. And with these 49 animals, when they were taken, the owner was to post bond, and the bond included $25 per day per animal for 30 days, plus $500 per animal for vet fees. And that totaled $61,250. And needless to say, no one can post the bond of several $1,000s immediately. So therefore, we have very, very few cases in the state of Missouri that once the animals are taken, they're not returned and the animal or the people cannot afford the fees. What we would like to see, if the person is innocent, that they would not be liable for those charges, which only makes sense if they're innocent. The one case briefly, and then I'll move on for someone else to testify. A case we were asked about a number of years ago in the state of Missouri involved a case in Marshall, Missouri, where the person had show dog Yorkies in her home, and the city confiscated the animals. And I'm not sure it was the city, but she was over her limit to have within the city limits. So the animals were taken. Many of these show dogs belonged to other people, and they could not get the animals back. The reason we were called in the case, the attorney for the owner called us and said, something needs to be done to level the playing field for the owners. This particular gal, the dogs were in good shape. She could not afford to post the bond. And where he came in, he wanted to go by the facility where the animals were being held, and the facility, the shelter person would not let him in to see the dogs. He ended up going behind the building and where the trash receptacles were and so forth, and one of the helpers had come out to take some trash out, and he began to interview her. And he said, I would like to see the dogs. I know the shape, the condition they were in when they were taken. They were show dogs in good shape. I would like to see them now. So she let him in the back to see the dogs. And he was surprised at the shape of the dogs at that time. They were very thin, and they had not been taken care of. And she said that she was given instructions to give 1 cup of food per day for 5 Yorkies. That was it. And they wanted the animals to look more hungry, not taken care of before the disposition hearing in 30 days. That's not fair. And so what we would like to do, and we thank the senator for bringing this forward, again, we do not support abuse and neglect, but we would like a level playing field that if someone is truly innocent, and in this case where it was just she was over the limit for the city requirement and the dogs were taken and they were in good shape, we would like to see an innocent person relieved of charges for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Senator McCreary.
I've heard these examples in years past. What city was your show dog story from?
I believe that was Marshall, Missouri.
Marshall, okay. And then what was the first thing you led with? I can't remember. I've already forgotten.
Oh gosh, I'm old. I don't. Basically, that when animals are taken, the person. Oh, talking about the case with the dogs. This one was in Buchanan County,
Okay.
and that's a recent case. We just sunshined that information, and I
Okay.
have not read all of it, but that is the one with the fees.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yes.
So, one of the Branson Police Department made an interesting point in the fiscal note that I wanted to just talk through with you. They said that the agency, meaning the Branson Police Department, shouldn't have to pay for the care and boarding of an animal for doing its job and trying to protect the animal. And this is the part that I'm trying to understand in this process. So a judge first would have to find probable cause to issue a warrant. So to me, if there's enough evidence for a judge to issue probable cause, then the agency should be held not liable for the financial part of that care. It's not like animal control or these animal groups are just doing this, like, they're not doing it in a rogue manner. They are going in front of a judge, and the judge finds probable cause for the warrant. So I'm trying to understand, like you're saying, if the person ends up being innocent, then the people that were just following the instructions of the warrant.
Well, in all due respect, in our state and in our country, someone is innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
And the way it stands right now, when the animals are confiscated, the person must post a bond, which $61,250 for 49 dogs for care for 30 days. I wish I had that expense to take care of my animals. Many of those fees set forth are put together by veterinarians that belong to the taking organizations, and oftentimes they exceed normal fees. And we're just asking for a level playing field. And then if a person is truly innocent, they shouldn't have to pay $61,000 to get their animals back when they did nothing wrong. Now, this case, I'm not referring to her being innocent one way or the other, but we do have cases like with the Yorkies where the person was truly innocent of abuse and neglect.
Right.
She was merely over a city ordinance. If, in my opinion, if the animals are in the home and they're clean and well taken care of, that is not, something that warrants her having to pay that kind of money to get them back. So what we're saying is that a
But this
person
bill
is
doesn't really address that. That's a issue of local control.
Right.
Municipalities and political subdivisions are allowed to set those limits within their boundaries.
They are, but they still took the animals, and she was being charged an exorbitant amount that she could not afford. And we're saying if she's innocent, she shouldn't have to pay those charges. The taking party, if they think they warrant taking,
Well, it's
then
the
they should be
judge that is
responsible.
actually issuing a warrant. I'm not using the word warrant as a vocabulary word. There's actually a warrant. So the judge thinks that there's enough information he found probable cause and then issues a warrant.
And sometimes that information is garnered by animal rights activists who secretly take pictures, as happened in a recent case, and then presented that information, and still the owner doesn't have any recourse. And what we're trying to say is if someone is innocent, regardless of who took them or who made the judgment, the innocent person should not be liable for exorbitant fees that they cannot afford, even if they're innocent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank
your
you,
testimony.
Mr. Chairman.
Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 132?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Tony Duggar, registered lobbyist for the Missouri Pet Breeders Association. We want to thank the senator for bringing this bill forward. This is a bill that we've been working on for a long, long time. And what we're trying to do here, as basically was said, was we're not here to protect the bad person. We're trying to level the field for the people out there who are doing a great job. We want to make sure when these dogs are confiscated that they're not neutered unless that it's needed to be done. We want to make sure that they have the proper vet care. We want to make sure that they're not euthanized if they're not needed to be. And those are the things that we're trying to get into statute to protect the good breeder. If this breeder is innocent, why should they pay the cost of all this high, expensive care that these veterinarians and other people are charging for their care? Why shouldn't, in the rural areas, we don't even have places for these animals to go to? Why shouldn't we allow a third party out there that could maybe take care of these animals while we're waiting for this court case to be solved? Those are the things that we're trying to do with this bill. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 132? Please proceed.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. My name is Barb York. I am a representative of the Missouri Animal Husbandry Association. I want to go on record in support of this bill. Breeders do not need to pay the bill if they're innocent because they automatically, because they can't afford it, will automatically release their animals to the other party. And it is not fair to them to lose their livelihood when they're innocent. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
In favor of Senate Bill 132.
Lost phone. Oh, is that yours, Tony? I'm sorry. Shannon Cooper today representing the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. Our issue's a little bigger. That's kind of a joke. Cows bigger than dogs. You guys are all asleep today. Probably show my age. This issue's been around here as long as I have, and I probably from our perspective is the fact that we're always nervous as the city grows out into the country that people who mean well and don't understand agriculture might take exception to our animals and how they look. And I was screwing around back there texting with the boys at the farm this morning, and I've got an old cow, number 55, that she'll let every calf in the world nurse on her, and she looks bad. And if somebody that didn't understand the cattle industry would pull up and look at her, they would probably say Shannon Cooper is an animal abuser, and we ought to take that old cow away from him because she appears to be starving. The fact is she does a good job, and she's probably 18 years old. But folks that don't live this life, they don't understand that, and the issue does get into cost. And as I look at the committee, most of you are aware of what it's like to raise cattle and what hay and grain costs. So anytime one of our members, this happens to them, there is a huge expense out there to take care of those animals. And we, as the previous witnesses stated, we don't believe it's right that if we are innocent and somebody that's uninformed uses a system to take those animals away from us and then we're proven innocent, then we have a huge bill to take care of to try and get those animals back. And I'll just be quite honest, in most cases it's not worth us paying for them to get them back because the economics of it just don't make any sense. So again, I think we need to be very careful when we take away people's property that has to be housed and fed when individuals who are making those accusations aren't experts or have knowledge in the animal welfare industry. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I have several comments on that, but I'll keep them to myself.
You
But,
sure?
Any questions for this witness? Senator McGrew.
So, on average, annually, how many cattle are confiscated because somebody called in a complaint and then somebody comes and gets a cow?
You know what? Rare. And I can tell you since I've been up here, I can think of probably 3 instances where I've been involved at back home. And all 3 of those instances, the sheriff reached out to either myself or Mr. Deering, and our members ended up going in there and helping resolve the problem. The first 2 complaints were not valid, but fellow cattlemen stepped forward and helped this individual out. The 3rd complaint, which made nationwide news, it was a horrible situation. We do not tolerate people doing that, and the local farmers stepped up. Sheriff asked folks to come in there and gather those cattle and move them out and get them fed. It was a horrendous deal. Made it very, very disappointing for our industry to see an individual do something like that. But at the end of the day, it was clear he was guilty. But it was also clear that the folks in Henry County stepped up to do the right thing for those animals and pulled them out of there. But again, the other 2 situations were just folks that didn't quite understand what was going on. Fortunately, we have a sheriff that understands agriculture. First thing he normally does is reach out to members of this association to say, hey, can you help us out? Let's see what's going on here. That's not always the case across the state, but I couldn't definitely tell you, Senator, there was 8 cases last year in Missouri.
You know, I've heard this bill every year, I think for 10 years now. And, you know, it just seems like a solution searching for a problem because I'm really just not hearing, like, to me, it's more of the fear of what could possibly happen versus cases. You know, my understanding is that through the judicial branch, they even have a tracking number for these types of things, and it's just really, it's not something that, in my opinion, rises to the level of needing legislation.
I wouldn't disagree, but I would also tell you this is a very difficult industry to be involved in financially, and there's a lot of fears we live with. A lot of them we can't deal with, whether it's weather related, but you know, the thought that somebody
Yeah,
who
I get
means
that.
well could come do that
Yeah.
terrifies our folks.
We have calf operation as well. I understand what you're saying, but we also don't have neighbors around us that would say anything.
And that's true, and most of us don't. I don't want to give the impression that this happens everywhere, but when it does, I mean, it can financially ruin people.
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Brown.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I would say, and you don't have to agree with me, but probably the only reason why we don't see more livestock confiscated because there's really nowhere to go with them. I mean, you know, in my area, in this, I've witnessed this happen before to a dog breeder in my home county, and this certain individual's dogs went to St. Louis Humane Society. He countersued after about 3 months of them being confiscated and won, and they came back emaciated, flea-ridden. I mean, it was awful. And but you've been around long enough, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been sitting here listening to some of the comments, you know, and about like warrants and things like that. But the director of ag has a huge influence over some of these warrants being written and everything like that, depending on what their agenda is. And if they have a so-called puppy mill agenda, like a previous director of ag we had, it was real easy for a judge to look at that information if somebody called in the Department of Ag complaining about, you know, a dog breeder that needed to be picked up or whatever. This is a situation I'm talking about that I know about. This is how it happened. Had a neighbor that was mad at this person and filed a complaint with Department of Ag. They came down, I mean, like SWAT team, everything, and took these dogs away. And ended up being, they were not in the wrong, countersued and won, and it was a bunch of money. It cost the state a fortune because they got tied up in it because when the judge was looking at the warrant, he was going up the information of people up here in Jeff City that had no idea who this person was, never inspected the facility or anything, and they were licensed. So, I mean, they had just done a state inspection like the week before they came and took his dogs.
Without a doubt, I mean, you know, if there's someone with an agenda, this could be used against you.
Any other questions for the witness? You know, just a quick comment. You talk about neighbors helping neighbors out, and even in the row crop industry, I have a couple guests back here today, and Doug and Christy raised your hand, and myself, when I got in trouble one year, got behind, they came down from Memphis, Missouri, and helped me out. And that's one of the greatest things about our industry that we live in is people are willing to help people out. So glad to hear your comments.
Without a doubt, proud of all the folks out there that look out after our neighbors. And again, it's just it's the rare instances that we worry about, but 99% of the time we're here to take care of each other's backs. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 132?
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Heath Clarkston here on behalf of the Missouri Veterinary Medical Association. Thank you, Senator Gannon, for bringing this bill. Bill's been around a long time. I agree with everybody on the panel. The reason the veterinarians support this bill is there's a provision in the bill that deals with when a owner is not liable, it ensures that the veterinary clinic or the veterinarian gets reimbursed for their costs in a lot of rural areas, and I guess not just rural. Veterinarians a lot of times are the first call the sheriff has, and there's costs associated. We just want to make sure that some of our clinics out in rural areas get reimbursed on this if it occurs. So that's my testimony.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
In favor of Senate Bill 132?
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Ben Travelis, Missouri Farm Bureau, would like to go on record in support of this legislation. We appreciate how the legislation streamlines the disposition process, and for that, would like to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you, ma'am. Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 132? Seeing none, anybody here not in favor of Senate Bill 132?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Bob Baker. I'm with the Missouri Alliance for Animal Legislation, And I first want to thank Senator Gannon for agreeing to meet with me and listen to my concerns. And one of the things I explained to Senator Gannon is I think this entire bill is a problem of not understanding our current law and not even understanding what's in this bill. For example, under our current law, under our current disposition process, there is no need to post a bond unless you lose at that civil trial with the disposition hearing. So when we hear these stories as people are just surrendering their animals because they cannot afford the bond, the only time they have to post a bond is if they lose at the civil trial and the state is able to show with the preponderance of the evidence that these animals have in fact been abused or neglected. Then if they want to appeal that ruling, they're entitled to do so, but that's the only time they have to post a bond. So no one is being intimidated into surrendering their animals until after there's been a finding in court that they did in fact abuse or neglect them. And I just want to make that very clear. And you know, this is argument has been, as some of the other people have mentioned, this bill has been going around for 12 years now. And the same issue of posting a bond comes up every year. And the statute is clear. It says to prevent disposition, you have to post a bond. There can be no disposition unless there's a finding of abuse or neglect. Senator Munslinger tried to correct this problem, so when he keep coming up every year, he was a former chair of the committee. And so he said, well, let's pass a statute that just says that to make it clear. There was no support for it, you know. So it is clearly in law that it's the only time. And again, I want to emphasize this with the preponderance of evidence. It's not just based on a search warrant. It's just like any civil trial, and the burden is on the state. So if you're an innocent animal owner, you don't even have to prove it. It's up to the state to prove that those animals have been abused or neglected. And you get an expeditious trial within 30 days to make your case. Other problem is with the misunderstanding is I don't think they even understand what this legislation does. I think what's confusing is on the very first page it talks about appearing at a disposition hearing. But if you open it up and you read page 4, section 6, it transfers the authority from the judge at the civil disposition trial to the judge at the criminal trial. So no matter what the judge does at the civil trial, it has no legal binding. You know, a few years ago, I gave a talk at the State Bar Association, and I used this as one of the examples of some of the bad legislation that was going on, and because there was identical legislation to this bill at that time also. And after my talk, one of the attendees came forward and he said, do you have a copy of that bill? I want to read it for myself. So I said, yes. I gave it to him. He sat down, spent 10, 15 minutes going over it, came back up and he said, you know, he said, I'm a judge. He says, I find this bill outrageous. You're ordering a judge to have a trial in their court and you're taking away their authority? I mean, it's outrageous. I don't think the proponents of this legislation, they're giving up their chance to reclaim their animals. They're doing away with the disposition process. And this is a hardship. And you know, the other thing, and it's been brought up earlier, and I just want to reemphasize this, they're just not losing their animals, possession of their animals. They're losing the money that they could be making off of those animals if those are working animals or if they're agriculture animals. And I can relate to this personally. I owned racehorses for a number of years. I put a lot of money, effort, and time in getting my horses ready to go to the racetrack. Someone comes in and sees my horses and holds them for a long period of time. I'm not just missing out on the companionship with those horses. I'm missing out on an opportunity to race those horses and make money for me. It'd be the same thing with the farmer. If their livestock was seized right before it was ready to go to the market, why wouldn't they want an expeditious civil trial? Under this law, they're going to have to wait until a criminal trial, and they're not going to be able to use those animals for an extended period of time. So I just want to emphasize this legislation helps no one. It doesn't help the innocent animal owner. It doesn't help the municipalities and counties that have to bear the cost of this. And it certainly isn't good for the welfare of animals when animals would have to be left in the hands of their abusers because the municipalities couldn't afford to keep it. And I just want to make one more point, and I'll close. Some of the proponents of this do realize that it actually does do away with the disposition process. And their argument is, well, maybe it would deter people from seizing our animals. We don't want our animals seized. Well, the problem is, you know, for animal welfare, in many cases, they do need to be seized. But more importantly, for the innocent animal owner, this isn't going to solve the problem. because I think the impression is the only way law enforcement can seize animals is under 578.018, which this bill addresses. Before this legislation passed in 1993, setting up the civil disposition process, they were still seizing animals, but there was just no disposition thing. And they were seizing them as evidence of a crime. And what they found out is, yes, it is true. In some cases, they couldn't afford to bear the cost of care of these animals, especially if it's a herd of horses or it's a hoarding situation with a couple hundred animals. But what they would do is, that didn't mean that they didn't seize them. They would seize them, and if they couldn't afford to care for them, they would return them, but they would get an on-site impoundment order from the judge, which meant that those animals will be staying on your property, but they're under the control of the state. Now, if this is an agriculture operation or working animals, what it means is you're being forced to pay for the care of your animals on your property, provide veterinary care, but you cannot use them in any way, shape, or form because they're under the custody of the state. In fact, one large dog breeding situation, they had, I forgot how many dogs, but they had 50 or 60 female dogs. So what the state did is, when they got the imposition, a court order, they seized the 8 stud dogs to make sure that they couldn't continue their breeding operation because they could afford to take care of 8 dogs. They couldn't afford to take care of all of them. So if you go back to those old days and animal owner is innocent, they're going to be stuck under the same process, feeding and caring for their animals, but not being able to use them and make money on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Senator McCreary.
So I'm wondering if one of the witnesses mentioned Buchanan County, and you did too. So a dog breeder in Buchanan County had her dog seized. Are you familiar with that situation?
Well, very familiar, because that case came up in the House. And I might point out, every year we're hearing some outrageous accusation about unfair animals being seized and losing their animals because it wasn't fair. In the House, it was indicated that Buchanan County Sheriff operated as a rogue sheriff, went out there and took those animals without no cause. So I did a sunshine request and got all the court documents, and they're all here. And I'm not going to read them all, obviously, but I would just give you a summary for you realize this case that we're talking about. And this is the case that they're basing this legislation on. First of all, Buchanan County's Sheriff's Department, when they found out about this case, they immediately contacted the Missouri Department of Agriculture. They even gave the Department of Agriculture a draft copy of their search warrant for their review and approval, and the Department of Ag approved of it. Subsequently, after they did the raid, they took all the evidence, photographs, videos, and the reports that they wrote and sent them to the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture reviewed them, and I'll quote, this is where their conclusion, quote, "The allegation that Shalinda Price was providing inadequate care to her animals was substantiated," end of quote. MDA also affirmed that she had falsified her application for registration as a show breeder. The department also affirmed that she was operating a commercial breeding establishment without a state license. MDA ruled that Ms. Price would be ineligible for any ACFA license or registration in the future. ACFA license referring to a dog breeding or registered as a show breeder. And at the civil disposition trial, where it was alleged that she had to come up with this $61,000 bond, she only had to come up with the bond because the judge refused to return the dogs to her because the state showed that those dogs were indeed being neglected. Then that's when she said, if you want to appeal it, you're going to have to come up with that bond. She did not have to pay 1 penny until the judge ruled against her. She then went to the criminal trial where she pled guilty and voluntarily surrendered the dogs. So this is a case where if the criminal trial, she was even found guilty. And I just want to mention some of the evidence that was found. She had these, I don't know if you're familiar with these small plastic swimming pools for little toddlers. Mm-hmm. They're just real tiny and plastic. She was housing those dogs in those pools. She admitted that she oftentimes didn't get around to cleaning them. Some of those dogs were in pools of urine and feces. They found that there was even urine and feces in the feed bowls. Another dog died due to pneumonia.
About 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not going to throw it, but I just wanted, this was a very serious case. In addition, the American Kennel Club suspended her for a lifetime and fined her $10,000. So this was a very serious case, and she only had to pay money when she was found that she had neglected these animals by a judge.
Okay, thank you. I'm being cut off, so
No,
I'm
no,
like,
no, you're not. I just.
that's right. I have more
No, I
questions
know.
for
Go
you.
ahead. No, go
No,
ahead.
that's fine.
Any other questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here else not in favor of Senate Bill 132, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Andy Briscoe. I'm the registered lobbyist for the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and we'd like to go on record as opposing this bill.
Any questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here else not in favor of Senate Bill 132? Any of those here for informational purposes only? Hearing none, Senator Gannon, any final comments?
Thank you.
That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 132. Next up is Senate Bill 335, Senator Crawford.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Sandy Crawford, District 28. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 335 this morning, and I will be using the Senate committee substitute, which you should have received. This bill allows the Department of Agriculture to adjust fees to more accurately reflect the actual cost of operating three programs within weights, measures, and the Consumer Protection Division, and those programs are metrology, propane, and egg quality. The bill also includes caps for those fees, and the last thing it does is extends the effective date for the revised Missouri Pesticide Use Act pertaining to the Pesticide Training and Certification Program, changing that date from January 1st of 2024 to January 1st, 2025. That is actually the same language as Senator Bernsketter's Senate Bill 570 that he has filed as well. Happy to answer questions, but I think I have a very good expert behind me that can probably do a better job.
Any questions for Senator Crawford? Senator McCreary.
Thank you. So I wanted to, and maybe you have a witness from the department who could address this. One of the things that gives me a little bit of heartburn is it says in the bill that if you don't pay your bill within 30 days, that your equipment can be deemed to be inaccurate. I'm paraphrasing.
I know. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
I just feel like there's the window of time doesn't seem to work on that for me, because you have to pay it within 30 days. So if you paid it on day 30, but then the department can say that nothing is accurate from that machine on day 30, I feel like there needs to be a little bit of a window there.
And I'm sure the department can address that, but I believe they're having trouble collecting, and so they're trying to incentivize a little bit quicker collection period. But I think she can speak to that.
Okay, I feel like there just needs to be like a little bit of a zone there.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Crawford? Seeing none, anybody here in favor of Senate Bill 335? Please proceed.
Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Danielle High with the Missouri Department of Agriculture. I'd like to go on record in support of Senate Bill 335. And Senator McCreary, I can get to your question afterwards if that's okay. But as the senator said, Senate Bill 335 updates sections referencing three programs within the department's Weights, Measures, and Consumer Protection Division. And so these three fee-funded programs, propane, egg quality, and metrology, are operating in budget deficits as these fees are extremely outdated. So for example, one of our egg licensing fees has been $5 since 1955. And so this would give the department the ability to adjust fees if and when necessary to more accurately reflect the cost of operating these programs. And caveat to that, it would also give MDA the ability to lower fees if and when necessary. And so, as the senator said, we do have a Senate committee substitute, which will create a threshold on fee amounts. So for metrology, it would put on a $500 cap. I will be honest with you, we are looking to do a per artifact system instead of a rate per hour, which is why in that language you will see we strike out a rate per hour. And that is just because at $125 per hour, we've had a lot of people feel that it's not fair if they're there to get 10 artifacts done and someone's paying the same price to have 2 artifacts done. And I can elaborate on that a little bit further if you would like, but propane, we're setting it at $400, and then for eggs, broken down into the 3 license types, retailers would be capped at $100, dealers at $175, and processors at $250. So we wanted to work with our stakeholders and provide a cap that made both consumers and the department comfortable for future changes. And then in addition, this language does make some technical changes. As Senator McCreary alluded to, it amends the definition of eggs to include quail. We have a lot of people that want to sell quail eggs, and right now by statute it's not allowed or recognized. And then it would also provide cleanup language to remove some outdated devices that we no longer test. It removes the rate per hour fee that I mentioned. And then it also does add that provision to language so that when inspection fees shall be paid, just because we have had an ongoing challenge with getting companies to pay on time. They've kind of just rolled it into their bills and haven't paid it. And we see that challenge with larger entities. I won't name them online, but more of the bigger facilities that can get away with not paying us. So that's why we do that. And then the pesticide language that's also included would extend that effective date from January 1, 2024 to January 1 of 2025. And as the senator also said, that's identical to Senate Bill 570 that Senator Bernskoetter has filed for us, and House Bill 1022, which Representative Gregory has, and that was voted out of the House Ag Committee unanimously. So recently it was decided that the implementation date should be pushed back a year due to the longer than anticipated timeline that it's taken the parties involved to revise the pesticide training and certification programs. So, many businesses are still feeling the effects of COVID. Many were working remote for a couple years, so that delayed us on getting manuals approved and things like that from the federal agencies, and it's taken longer than we thought to write curriculum. So we don't want to rush final product for our farmers, and we want to make sure it's good when we get it out. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Senator McCreary.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm fine with doing that if it helps prompt people to pay their bills. There were several years ago, Representative Roan convened a group of electeds with I would describe them as stakeholders when we were revising the fee structure for herbicides and pesticides and things like that. So when I first looked at this, my concern is that we were bypassing input, but it sounds to me like you've worked behind the scenes to get input from people that this would actually affect.
Yeah, so I know that, I think that was in 2021 maybe when that came through that bill. But from what I understand, the pesticide fees, that portion is separate, and they've got that 5-year window before they have to review them again if we're talking about the same thing, which I can check with that and get back to you. But for the metrology and pesticide ones, I know those haven't been changed, like I said, since 2013 to 1955, several years ago. So I can look into that further and kind of get some information, and we can discuss that if you'd like.
That sounds good, thanks. And I do think it makes sense to add quail eggs in. You're seeing them on menus more and more often, and I actually once had 2 quail living with me named Dan and Marilyn. So we were very excited to have eggs in our house, so thank you.
Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 335?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brent Hemphill with the Missouri Propane Gas Association. We want to go on record in support of the bill. I think the current law has been $75 for almost ever. We passed this bill way back when I had hair and some time ago, but it was vetoed by the governor because he didn't want to be responsible for voting for a fee increase. And so we appreciate the senator willing to address this issue. We do like the fact that you're putting a cap on there. We do not
support allowing a director unilateral decision to raise a fee for whatever. So this is $400. It's my understanding. I haven't read the Senate Committee substitute, but that's per bobtail. So every propane vehicle would have to have this $400 inspection, which we fully support. We want to make sure that the meters are accurate and safe. So we fully support the increase in the fee. I texted my client not knowing that it went to 400. We thought maybe 300 because we're going from $75 to 300 seems reasonable, but I will defer to the committee and the senator. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 335?
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jacob Knable with the Missouri Corn Growers Association. Would like to go on the record in support of this legislation today. Missouri Corn, we understand the need for the Division of Weights and Measures to be adequately staffed and funded to complete their central role of creating a fair and equitable marketplace in Missouri agriculture. Would also like to go on the record in support of the committee's substitute that includes the portion on the pesticide applicator fee extension. And I can't quite answer your question on the history of the pesticide applicator program with the fees in there. I know we were involved with those conversations, but in my understanding, that's a separate kind of category from what's going on with this today. So be happy to take any questions you may
Any
have.
questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 335? Seeing none, any of those opposed to Senate Bill 335? Seeing none, any of those for informational purposes?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Ron Leone. I'm the Executive Director for the Missouri Petroleum and Convenience Association, and that means I represent many of your constituents that own and operate gas stations, convenience stores, and truck stops. I just wanted to go on record to thank the sponsor for putting in caps on this bill. I was here in 2013, the last time we looked at fees for weights and measures, and it was critical at that time to put in the caps, and I think it's even more critical today given term limits that we need to put in the caps. Caps ensure that consumers are protected, that weights and measures, which again is the executive department, has to come back and ask you as the legislative department for oversight and permission if they ever want to go over that cap. And let's be honest, fees are taxes, and the legislature should never fully delegate their authority to tax and their power of the purse to the executive branch. And so I'm very happy that the sponsor, not only the Senate sponsor, but the House sponsor has agreed to the caps, because I think that's really critical, and just wanted to mention that to the committee and publicly thank the sponsor.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Informational purposes only.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is David Overfeld. I'm the president of the Missouri Retailers Association and a lobbyist for the Missouri Grocers Association. My members pay the $5 egg fee, which hasn't been changed since 1955. I will just say I've been here for 40 years, and over that time, most of the departments said, let's just do away with it. But now they think that it's a worth to a fee here. They had one phone call with us and told us what they were planning on doing. Not that there'd be no caps in the bill, but hopefully they'll continue to work with us when they go forward in the future to decide what this fee should go up to. Because I've had people squawk 5 to 100, but I mean, that's not what it's going to be. So, and you hate to have to come back every decade to change it.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Senator Black, do you have a question? Or? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here else, and for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator, you have any closing comments?
Maybe just one. The fees are intended to just pay for the program, and since none of these fees have gone up for so long, that's the intention. So I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 335. Hearing no other business coming before the committee, I move to adjourn. Have a second. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. All those opposed, no. We are adjourned.